I would argue that there is a common thread there, which is it's about the way I would see my channel is about epistemic humility, and by that I mean it's about raising awareness of the fact that we can never perceive reality directly. We can only perceive a compression of reality. But the problem about any compression of reality is that whatever compression is going to happen, there are multiple ways of looking at reality, right? So there are multiple compressions. So to be more compression aware as you are approaching anything in life, to be more light in that about the fact that your specific compression is not the only possible way to look at the world, and also compression is not the actual truth. Compression is just an approach to see the truth and the full implications that this generates for society, for AI, for everything actually, because it turns out that all the data that has been trained, that AI has been training on, is not quite reality, but rather specific forms of compression of reality. And I am concerned about epistemic gatekeeping, particularly what is happening in academia, the restrictions of certain kinds of truths to emerge via science. And I have looked at your website too, and I think you are tapping into a lot of issues that relate to that as well. I would say even in your whole career has been a little bit of
My whole career,
a
yeah.
big road trip on that, right?
I would say so, yeah.
I think the first time I met you was over 30 years ago now, right?
I don't
Because
remember.
when you
But
were
yeah, that's probably
friends with
correct.
my brother, yeah.
Yeah, well,
In
yeah,
this is
exactly. Yeah.
electrical engineering, right? This is when you were a student of electrical engineer. This is 30 something years ago.
Or even before that, when Tiberi was
When you
going to high school,
yeah, when you guys were
Rosario.
in Rosario, yeah. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. Small world.
Yeah.
Yeah. But tell me a little bit about where you came to be where you are, and we can start from there.
I don't know where I am.
I know.
Where am I? Right now, I'm in the process of launching a school of consciousness. So this is my latest project, so to speak. And it's been an excited journey, like long time in the making, I'd say. I started like my interest. So like I was very much growing up interested in technology, so much so that I went to the engineering school, electrical engineering school, and computer science. And and at some point, I was designing microchips, micro like a computer chips. And I thought, well, this is all fun and nice, but what about the ultimate computer, which is, in my opinion, was the brain at the time. So how can I learn about the brain? Because what I really wanted to understand is how the brain creates consciousness. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna drop out from the electrical engineering school and go to medical school, which is an undergrad school in Brazil. And that's what I did. I went to medical school to become a neuroscientist. And that I did. I became. I had two motivations, to be honest. But one was to explore and understand the brain, how it works, and do brain neuroscience research, brain research. And the other motivation was that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I thought, like, I'm going to medical school would be, at least I would be independent. I'll be an autonomous professional, I thought. And I think that was the rationale, like growing up in the 90s in Brazil, southern Brazil. And then eventually, well, I found myself in medical school. I spent my 5 of the 6 years in medical school doing exactly that. Like I was doing brain mapping research the whole time, and and starting not necessarily companies but products. So I built the very first medical website in Brazil back in 1995. when I was in medical, first year medical school. So that has been my career ever since. It has been a combination of neuroscience and particularly the pursuit of a deeper understanding of consciousness and entrepreneurship. Does that answer the question? Like,
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
yeah,
So you, so I did read your book, Spirituality, and oh, actually, it's right in your left there.
it's right
That's
here.
cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
leave it there
So
because I give so many, like, I have so many conversations about it.
yeah, so you just made a point that I guess that's where you came from this idea that perhaps consciousness will be some form of emergent feature of a lot of complexity in the brain. That's where you thought initially, and but clearly, the book Spirituality is trying to make the sort of the opposite point, or at least it's trying to make the point that this is a viable alternative way of looking in the world.
Yeah,
Can you tell me because I definitely see I definitely understand the argument that there is an obvious axiom that we make in physics, in science in general. The physicalism there's a particular axiom there. There's, of course, it could just be wrong, and but I also believe that the alternative idea, the idea that consciousness might be the fundamental unit, the fundamental stuff instead of anything physical, could be understood also as an axiom too. So I see that is equally. I see, for instance, them as potentially observation equivalent, but even though they are essentially completely different models of reality. So can you tell me, do you see a specific reason why you should believe in one versus the other? I definitely believe in the argument that you should not necessarily take the word of science to understand the axioms of, of physics. That I
yeah.
understand.
Well, you cannot take the word of science to understand first person reality because that's beyond the realm of science. I mean, so it's a choice. I think we should step a little bit back and give more context to
Yeah.
the audience. So the way I see it, there are at least two types of reality: third person consensus reality and first person reality, right? So first person reality is where everything really happens, like all of your experience of the world happens in first person reality. And because science assumes physicality to be fundamental reality, then naturally, per that assumption, consciousness has to be a byproduct of brain activity, right? Because from a physical standpoint, what we have is a brain, a body, and a brain. So if there is anything really going on at a consciousness level, then whatever that is, whatever consciousness is, that's coming from brain activity. So that's the natural consequence of assuming that physicality is fundamental, right? The other possibility, which is not what our world has been assuming for hundreds of years now, is that consciousness might be fundamental and might be independent of physical reality. And the thing is that and those are, as you said, those are the two models of reality, I would say, because those two realities are kind of, you cannot question them. So you cannot question the existence of physical reality. It exists, right? You can measure it like by all means and purposes. Like there is reality to the physical phenomenon, to physicality. But you can't either deny the reality in consciousness. So because certain phenomena only exist in consciousness, left to its own devices, science will never be able to discover those phenomena. In the example I use in my book, which is pretty easy to understand, it's pain. Left to its own devices, an AI robot, assuming that AI are not conscious, Like an unconscious, intelligent scientist will never be able to discover the existence of pain because pain has to be experienced. So it was never science who told us that pain exists. There wasn't a discovery of science. And science is all about discovering things about reality, right? So that kind of discovery wasn't given to us by science. That pain exists was informed to science by scientists. It's like pain pertains to the realm of scientists who are conscious beings, not to the realm of science. Does that make sense? Pain
Yeah.
as an
So
experience, yeah.
yeah, pain, a thought, like there's a
Love.
lot of experiences that we have that are really love, grief. There are lots of experiences that we have that are very hard to make it intersubjective. I don't know if you're familiar, but in philosophy there is this concept of intersubjectivity, which is
No, no.
I find it particularly helpful to discuss this because using the language that you spoke in the book, right? If you think about it, science, the way it has been developed thus far, the current version of the scientific method, it only focuses on ideas that scale, right? That essentially scale across instruments of observation, across people, and so on,
Whatever can be
and
measured, right?
that makes them like objective, right? But then
Yeah.
you're talking now about the blind spots of science, which are in principle any subjective experience that you cannot actually precisely describe to another person, because that other person, for that person to replicate exactly the experience that you had, that person would have to enter inside you and have the experience that you had. And of course, it's at least as far as we know, it's impossible.
Right.
So intersubjectivity is this idea that there is an actual spectrum there of how much a given idea scales. And of course, in one spectrum would be something like maybe a unique experience I had, for instance, the love I had for my specific son, which I'm sure you may have love for your son or your daughter, but it might be just there's some specific aspects of it that is unique in my experience than
But you
yours.
can use paranormal subjective experience as an example.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
pain is pain is paranormal to science. It's not a scientific fact, but it's a
Hmm.
consensus among people because everybody feels it. So there is a I don't know if that relates to your intersubjective
Yeah,
concept.
yeah,
Whereas like
yeah,
some
yeah.
paranormal phenomena only happen to a few people and then they're not
That's
considered
right.
to be normal. They're paranormal,
Exactly, exactly.
even though
There are
they're all
certain ideas like,
subjective.
yeah, pain in thought, because we all have had similar, or at least we think we have had similar experiences. We are more okay speaking about that as if they actually exist. But like you said, it's exactly like you said. It was not they were not wary. Whoever is the science that decided to measure pain with only correlation, never causation, based on the measures in the brain, they were never necessarily wearing the scientific coat when they decided to talk about that. Because they were just using their personal experience. Yes, I feel something that I like, that we human beings label as pain, and let's
Uh,
see what happens, right? That there was the humanity of that
yes.
person who was doing that. But
Yeah.
the nice thing about intersubjectivity, which I really like, is that it also allows you to zoom in different aspects of science and understand that it's not true that science is just this kind of blob that is always objective, right? Like, for instance, I deal with causal inference in social sciences, and there's a lot more degree of subjectivity there, or rather intersubjectivity that is not fully objective there, right? There are certain for instance, I study a lot ways to reduce inequality of opportunities. There are certain axioms, there are certain ways we go to approach reality in economics that will be very different from the way we approach reality from sociology perspective, and or even anthropology and so
Exactly.
on, right?
Even the study of pain can be even pain, which could not be discovered by science, can be studied indirectly by science. But for that, you need you need a conscious instrument. Like in the case of pain, you need a conscious being to report back to you. Like, oh, on a scale from 1 to 10, my pain is 4. That kind of science requires a conscious instrument. And the problem, and it's, yeah, you're right. It's not that you cannot study subjective phenomena. It is just that science cannot discover those phenomena, or even maybe study them to a deeper degree without the use of a conscious instrument. And that makes the whole difference. And another problem is that the assumption, even though science can study subjective phenomena, it hasn't revisited its own assumption that it doesn't. So subjective phenomena still live in a lesser category. It's like people say it's an epiphenomenon, or it's, some scientists will even say like consciousness doesn't exist, and so therefore pain doesn't exist. So they wouldn't even require anesthesia if they undergo surgery, because it's all an illusion. It's all like an epiphenomenon. Um, I think that the status of subjective reality is secondary to the status of physical reality. So physical reality is still considered primary, whereas subjective reality, it's not that it's not that science would actually defy the existence, like a challenge the existence of subjective reality, because we challenge it all the time. Like, is AI conscious or not? And then we keep debating on that, but we don't really have the means to study that, to discover that. Um, we wouldn't even be discussing consciousness if it was not for the fact that we are conscious beings. So that and that's the primary fact of our existence, and that's the fact that we exist. Like, whatever you tell me, you are not going, I mean, you can come with whatever science you want, you're not going to convince me that I don't exist.
Yeah, there's at least, if there's one thing that we are certain, I think the first time I heard of that was St. Harris saying that. The first time I heard is something like this. We do know at least of one thing, that we are having the experience that we're having right now.
Yeah, and
It could be a matrix kind of experience. That's a possibility, but at least we are experiencing whatever we're experiencing right now.
so that's the only thing we can be sure of. Like, I cannot be sure that you exist, that you are conscious. Like, there's a whole lot of things that it could all be a simulation, but that I'm having the experience, therefore I exist. Because for anything to have an experience, that thing has to exist, and that's not up to discussion. And I mean, we can discuss, but I don't think we're gonna get anywhere. So my problem with physicality is that even though we study subjective phenomena scientifically, they are still considered a secondary type of reality, not as real as physical reality.
But let me ask you a question related to that. So I think there are two aspects of it. One, I think in philosophy, I think we usually call that realism, which is one thing is to state, it's still an axiom, but we state that there is an objective reality out there that is independent of our own experience. So I think there are many uh,
Which is
physicalism is not the only only way to believe in that. There are many, like idealism, at least the modern version of idealism, tends to believe in that as well, right? Tends to believe that it's entirely possible there's an external reality out there.
it is possible. I don't think it's the most likely possibility, that, I mean, there is a reality that it works as a framework for us to be, for interact with each other.
Sure.
So there is like a, there is this reality. I think the question is physical reality more fundamental than subjective reality? Is subjective more reality more fundamental than physical reality, or are they at the same level? They coexist somehow.
Yeah. When I said before about realism, I did not suggest that I do not mean physical reality. I mean just reality. There's something out there that is independent of me waking up every day. Okay. Uh, so physicalism,
But then you have
i-
another
i-
problem there, which
yeah,
is
tell me.
there is something out there independent of me. But then you have to define who you are. Because
Sure,
if
sure,
you're
sure.
talking about
We're
you
entering
as a
words.
physical body, then that's probably true. If you're talking about you as consciousness, then it's probably not the case then, in my philosophy at least.
But tell me more, because help me understand where is your philosophy grounded? Because so, for instance, I do. So, for instance, if you think about something along the lines of Advaita Vedanta, for instance, right? So, what they call Brahman, this
Mhm.
overall consciousness, uh, that's their view about what reality is. But that then you would enter in the non-duality world. But of course, at the moment we each of us have our own consciousness, we are already in the
Do we have our
dual.
own consciousness, or do we perceive to have our own consciousness, but we are actually all part of the same consciousness? We are
Okay, so let's
expressions of one
define.
same consciousness, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Good, good, good. Okay, so please help me figure out here, because this is
Because
where
because like
definitions matter a lot here, right?
yes.
Can you define to me what you are perceive what you are calling consciousness, so that we can
Yeah,
continue?
let me start by defining what like science assumes and society in general assumes that we are who we are is this our body, right? We are a body and a brain. Therefore, if the body is no more, then I am no more. If the brain stops functioning, then I'm no more. So that's the current definition of who I am. And we say, but it's interesting that even though we use the definition, we say that I have a body, I have a brain, I have a hand. So who is there which has a brain? Because if we are the brain, then the brain shouldn't have a brain. The brain should be the brain, should be the thing. In my philosophy, we do have a brain, we do have a body, because that which we are is consciousness. So we do even have a mind, because a mind is also very much related to brain activity. So the mind that is created by the brain ceases to exist once the brain stops functioning.
But who is we here? Who is,
In
when
my
you say
in
wait?
my philosophy, we are consciousness. We are consciousness. We can then
But
dive deeper.
we, you mean, is there any in which degree do you and I experience ourselves in different ways? So please use a singular, like I am consciousness and you are consciousness in a separate way.
We're both consciousness, but then the thing is that how does reality work in consciousness space? I don't purport to have this exact answer of how that work, but I can come up with some ideas. Like in the physical world, things are individualizable. They can be individualized into bodies. So and you can measure things. You can measure distances. So there is a distance between you and I, which make us separate. We are not the same. I'm not sure that same logic applies to consciousness, because as far I can tell, like in a purely subjective qualia type space, everything is possible. So so distances. What it seems to me is that distances and physical properties in general, they belong to physical reality, not to consciousness. So the question then, at a consciousness level, it stops. The thing is that if we can be separated in consciousness, right? If there is such a thing as Greg as a consciousness and Daniel as a consciousness, then we already have two things in that consciousness space, me and Greg. If there are two things in that consciousness space, almost that by definition, that consciousness space is not the most fundamental space there is, because something ought to be giving structure to that space so it can allow for the existence of two different things, or three or four
So
or more.
I
So most
I'm
fundamentally, you shouldn't have that kind. So at the most fundamental level, there's no structure to allow. It's so at the most fundamental level, reality is not informational. I think that's what I want to say. Because for you to
okay.
process information, you need structure.
No, I think I'm a bit lost here. So let me try to
Okay,
understand
let's
this
step
better.
back then.
No, yeah, yeah. Let me try to understand. So, first of all, I think it's useful for us to not even go into what science thinks, exactly because of what you said earlier. Because science pays particularly attention on what is objective, I think clearly we are already. So,
Beyond
let's
that.
just try to discuss something that
Yeah.
at least nests the possibility that science is wrong, right? That with the physicality. So let's just think about the world like
Not
for instance,
wrong. It's just limited in scope.
yeah, wrong in terms of it has a blind spot about a particular axiom.
Yeah.
So, so let's just uh, think, for instance, in my perception, right? The fact is, I am. If you ask me what I perceive most of the time as if I am much more likely, as if my perception it comes out of this body that I label Greg, much more so than as if I come from this other body that I currently label Danielle,
Right.
right? And if I ask you this question, you probably would say the exact same story that your perception tends to come more from Danielle.
Yes.
It's also true that I have had experiences with meditation that appears to me like I can again from my perception it appears to me that my experience is not necessarily anchored necessarily to my body. I have had experience like that. Again, this is under my axiom. This is how I perceive this, and that's how I interpret this. Maybe there's
Right.
another interpretation one can come up from physicality that I just had this uh, somehow cognitive bias. But it is a system. Whatever bias I may have about this, it has to be systematic thing because it was not one or two experience I had that. It's replicable. Anyway,
Okay.
so I bet based on the book that I read, you had had similar experience that makes you have experience tell a similar story about yourself. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I've got a similar. I've had a near-death experience. Yeah.
I see. Do you care to share with us
Yeah.
about your
I was
near-death
a heart
experience?
attack. I was at the gym exercising, doing abdominals, and then as I stood up, like you have sometimes this hypotension that makes you lose your vision for a while, but it's usually back pretty fast. And in my case, that curtain came down, and I couldn't see, and I tried to reach out to someone in the gym, and with then, like next thing I know, I am in this void, I would say. So it wasn't a very colorful experience, because a lot of times the NDEs people go and find people and whoever and have experiences and visit places, things like that. Not to me. Like with me, I was in a void, in a black space, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't have any identity. I didn't have a body. I didn't have memory. I didn't have language. I didn't see anything. It was like a pure blackness, pitch black. But it was the most profound experience of peace I've ever had in my life. So it was extremely peaceful. Like I didn't want to come back from there. And
So
so in a,
you were perceiving certain things like peace. You had some experience, even though you were feeling the void and all that. You were perceiving certain things still.
yeah, but
Uh,
it was a very basic kind of experience, a very basic kind of existence, kind of primal existence, like a monad. Like I could only experience peace, but I didn't have any sense of time or I didn't know I existed in a sense because there wasn't like a cognition, and knowing requires some cognition. It was just I don't know, maybe like being a tree. I don't know how does it feel like being a tree? I have no clue. But probably the tree experience is richer than that because you have light and all sorts of stimuli, I guess. But in my case, it was just peace. There was no stimuli coming from anywhere, and it was pure peace. And then as I was coming back to the body, so I was out for like 10 minutes, and um, and as I was coming back to the body, it was discomfortable, like uncomfortable. It was the noise was incredible. It was like there was a million drums beating around me. And I realized that that was biology. That was the sound of biology. So we live in very noisy machines, but we can't really tell because the noise is always there. So we suppress it. Like we don't, there's no contrast. There's no time in our lives where the noise stops, like it did for me for those minutes. But yeah, and
Sometimes I wonder if there is an analogy here about maybe that's why when most kids, exactly like just a few uh, days after they're born, most kids a few days after they're born, they mostly sleep. They are
yeah,
awake only a few hours a day. But during the times that they're awake, they're usually very
in our
they
connection
are
to
not
that,
okay with life. They don't seem to be okay with life.
yeah,
I wonder what they hear from their
oh yeah,
perspective.
and that goes for years, I'd say, in less and less, lower degrees of that. But yeah, like as children, we are very much still connected to the other side. And as we grow up and like our as our brain matures and starts conveying more and more of this reality, we lose our connection to the other side. That's my feeling. And
When you say the other side, what do you mean? Because try to build some bridge for a person like me. For instance, I have had experiences, but purely from meditation, which I do not know how to
yeah,
explain. But I'm very open minded to come out of the physicalism axiom, but I work in science, so it's really hard for me not to try to falsify, try to probe it and things like that. Try to help
yeah.
me. When you say the other side, what exactly
Just
do you
ask the
mean?
question, I'll help you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
What do you mean by when you think the other side?
the other side, I think that this reality where the physical reality is not the most fundamental one, and
Okay.
that we exist is the only thing that is really real. So it's like a life being a play in a theater, and we are playing characters here, but the real actor is in the backstage. The real actor is somewhere, and the other side is behind the curtain. The actor can always go back to a truer reality. And I wouldn't say that it's ultimate reality. I think there are levels of reality because as I was telling you before, whenever there is structure to reality, whatever you have whenever you have an information based reality, that's probably not the most fundamental reality. because something has to be given the structure for information to exist and be processed. And but anyway, I try to keep it simple and keep it like a reality, physical reality and consciousness reality, which is where conscious experience happens.
Yeah. So can you try to explain this connection between information and so what do you mean when you say that reality is not fundamentally informational?
So there is a friend of mine, Reese. He's written the book, The Simulation Hypothesis. And the simulation hypothesis is the idea that we this existence might actually be a simulation within a bigger supercomputer, so to speak. So that's his. He doesn't. He's open to possibilities. Maybe it's just like another computer of some sort. I don't know, quantum computer or some other sort of computer, or it might be reality itself. Reality itself might be able to create these simulations. But in either case, we are not in the most fundamental reality. And and other people have raised that idea, including Elon Musk and other people, that this is not base reality. So much so that we have realities that we have simulations in this reality, right? So how do players in that, like games, how do players or characters in those games perceive reality, if they do at all? Um, so his idea is that this reality is it's probably a simulation being produced by a more fundamental or deeper or higher reality. And then my conversation with him one day was like, well, Riz, but if this, because then it becomes a recursive argument, like, because if is the next reality the most fundamental or not, or there could be another computer simulating the reality above us, and so on and so forth, like how many realities you have above us, because if this is simulation, then the one above us could just be simulation as well, right? And he makes a point that there might be a limit to the processing capacity of information, because at some point you have to at some point whatever is creating all of these realities is going to consume so much uh, whatever energy or resources to produce all of those realities that you cannot move any further up. There has to be the base reality. And then my argument to him was like, well, but if there is such a reality where that is running mega giant, like a supercomputers of some sort, that is creating all the subsequent, the lower realities, then that reality itself cannot be fundamental because it contains so much structure. Like it has all of these computers, all of this technology, all of the. So in that case, that reality, in my perception, it's not the real deal, because something has to be giving rise to that much structure. So the question remains: what is giving structure to the base reality where all the computers are? And it's not that I necessarily subscribe to the simulation hypothesis, but to answer your question, that's where my reasoning around base reality having to be very simple and deprived from complex structure, even math, because math comes from somewhere. Like I've heard someone say, I think it was uh, Levin, the biologist. He does great work in consciousness, and he's very experimental, like an empirical scientist. And uh, he says that math, for example, exists in a Platonic space, which is a space that is non-physical. Because if you look in reality, you will never find the number one, or maybe in a birthday cake, but you don't find number one, number two. Like those are abstract ideas that help us describe this world. So there are there are aspects of reality that are very abstract and very objective at the same time. Like math is a very objective thing, but it's still abstract. And they help us describe the world where we live. So those things exist in a space, a Platonic space or a realm that is non-physical, but without those concepts, without that universe of abstractions, this world couldn't exist. And he uses that to propose that embryogenesis and how the cells know where to go and how our brain, our body shape comes to be is also related to templates or things that exist in this Platonic space. I don't want to talk like on his behalf, like I wouldn't be, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to. But it makes you think that fundamental reality is probably very subjective, abstract, very low structure.
I I think there are certain ideas that I think most people already can grasp that suggest that. So I think Hoffman and other people have made this
Yeah,
argument that
Don
probably
Hoffman.
we probably have evolved not necessarily to create models of reality that are in any way, shape, or form accurate. They're probably models of reality to survive, rather. We do know, for instance, that certain animals do have certain senses that are way better than ours. We do know based on instruments that certain things exist, like infrared, even though our eyes don't see. We do know several things like that. So probably we have a lot of, let's say, uh, limitations in our ability to understand
Yeah.
reality. So
I
now,
think that,
but let me just ask you this question, because now, from where I come from, the moment I believe in our limitations to understand reality, and the same way as I understand our limitations in terms of our how hard it is for every human being to deal with cognitive dissonance, and how we need to somehow collect patterns and impose some structure in the world and so on. It makes me a little bit, my I guess skeptical side makes me wonder, like, to what extent, so all those
what are
things that
you
we are hearing.
skeptical about?
Yeah. So to I think, for instance, I'm very skeptical about physicalism, like we talked about, like we just
Okay.
talked about.
Because usually
I'm
skeptical is the opposite of that.
No. But what I mean is that I am skeptical about physicalism because the specific axiom, I do not see any specific reason to believe in the axiom that the fundamental thing will be physical. I do see the how valuable is this assumption to make sense of the world and to actually build in the shoulders of giants and to do a lot of stuff, and that's what science has done, and it's amazing. But I am extremely open-minded to different other alternative axioms, especially because when they are at the same level, as in, for instance, as far as I can tell, I do not see any contradiction with the possibility that the true fundamental unit is consciousness instead of the physical stuff. I think, I mean, of course, we have not built that other kinds of physics yet, right? We cannot have built that kind of science yet based on all that, and that's why it's very unfair to compare an extremely well developed science of over 300 years based on one axiom versus an incipient kind of science. But I'm always open to think about different axioms, especially axioms that they seem to be logically coherent. You know what I mean? And I do believe that this whole simulation thing is also logically coherent. At least the some of the versions that I saw, I never found any incoherence. But I'm kind of interested in understanding, so why we should go further, right? Why should we go? I definitely believe in the idea of exploration and exploring different axioms to see where they land us to understand more things, right? So, like, as a scientist, for instance, I am totally okay making some axioms that are kind of not in a perfect infrastructure. So it could be wrong. In order to build something and make sense of the world, to see if I can verify something and test and falsify something. So I bet I am very into that. My question for you is, like, as an outsider, let's say a person who is not doing science, or who's not even necessarily trying to do this other alternative kind of science, depending on, or philosopher for that matter.
Yeah, I don't
Why
call it a
should we
science.
believe? Why should we believe in one versus the other? Why should we not just be agnostic and still value the exploration and be very open-minded to these alternative ways of looking at the world, and to see whether they can give us something that the other methods cannot? Because I really believe, for instance, that different axioms can take us to a more precise understanding of the world at the margin, right? Once you understand one, what can you go with one axiom? Then you understand where else can you go with another axiom? You can understand, you can have a more profound understanding of the world, a more complete understanding of the world.
Yeah. First of all, I think that believing is kind of an immature approach to anything in life, because at some point you probably believed in Santa Claus, right? And then, like, what is believing? What does that even mean? Believing is a way to close doors, essentially. Believing is a way to reject other ideas. So I don't propose that anybody believes in anything. What I do propose is that people be more mindful of their assumptions
I agree.
to to develop the rationale that whatever they want to use in their lives. So science is great because it's based on the axioms and the assumptions, and it was able to develop a lot of essentially technology out of it. Understanding about the nature of reality through the scientific lens is limited to physical reality, because that's what all science is about. It's about understanding this world. And if this world is a simulation, science will be a great thing at finding out what the rules of the simulations are, but not necessarily finding out the underpinnings of the simulation. It's like all of those constants in physics that nobody knows why they are the way they are, like the speed of light, for example. And and they will say, "Wow, this is we only exist in this universe because those variables turned out to be right, and in those universes where they were wrong, the universe doesn't exist." But then you are already talking about substrate, or like a place where universes exist, which is beyond what science can probably, maybe in the future it'll probe. But I don't really see how science can replace conscious experience in like a first-hand access to reality. And I do agree with Don Hoffman that the reality we experience, the experience is real, but the experience is probably a translation of an interpretation of a reality that has more complex structure. Like Don Hoffman likes to use the parallel with the computer and the icons on the screen. So the reality we perceive to exist is the icon, the screen, but then it tells us nothing, absolutely nothing about all the transistors and all about the circuitry that goes behind that. And I agree with him that that's probably what's happening. So the reality we live in is not the most fundamental thing, but the experience of it is very real, is the real deal. So I don't really see how instruments will be able to probe qualia, for example. And if they, even if an instrument could tell us, oh, there is, because instruments have already told us, right? There is light beyond the spectrum we can see. But then what is the conscious experience of seeing that light? Science cannot tell us. Even if it has already discovered that there is more than we can see, it cannot tell us how it feels like seeing it, because we don't have the
When
means
you
to
say
see.
when you say science cannot tell us, of course, science currently cannot tell us. So
Even in the
do you
future, I
think
think
there's
it's by
something? Yeah.
definition.
So let's talk about
Okay.
something that you think there's a fundamental, because one thing that I don't, I, at least that's not how I perceive science. It's like, for instance, when you think about science, we tend to connect to this notion of physicalism,
Yeah.
but there are lots of other
Okay,
things,
I'll give you that,
other
right?
ways of
Like
understanding the world,
what you do is
right?
science, and what you do is like
Exactly. There are
study
lots of ways of understanding.
subjectivity, right?
We use the scientific method to understand social science, to understand causal
Yeah,
inference,
even
empirical
political
causal inference,
science, which I
yeah,
think like it's
epidemiology, and
yeah.
so I think that I still think your argument is valid here, though. But I would just relabel that, and I will not say physic. The physical thing is the fundamental uh,
You know, like the thing
issue.
with the
There
name
is the
science,
objectivity. Is the
you know, like
objectivity
and
is
particularly for you being academia, is that science is what's accepted. So everybody wants to say, "Oh, what I'm doing is science," because that's how you get validation. But the science, the way I'm using the word right now, so if you explore it, extrapolate it to political science, like that's not that's not the scientific method anymore. Like at some point there are a lot of studies, there are considered scientific studies, but they don't really rely on the scientific method necessarily. And even if they
I
do,
think I think they do. It's just that the this is why I think the notion of intersubjectivity matters here. I think the method of science is fairly adaptable, and over the years it has adapted to deal with things that are much more complex than physics. Like for
yeah.
instance, complex systems like economics is a much more complex situation than physics. So you have to deal with probability much more so
But
than physics
isn't
does.
that including probability an indirect way to measure things that otherwise you because you just can't measure them directly because
Sure, sure, sure,
they're
sure.
so
It's a form of obtaining some form of objectivity. That's this goes back to the idea. It's not the physical thing, the fundamental quality of science that you are criticizing. Is this fundamental uh, no is this illusion that the only way we can make sense of the world is through objectivity. We do objectivity things pretty much as physics does. It's just that like for instance, whenever I go and estimate a causal effect of if you a person gets one more year of schooling, what happens with their earnings, these are ideas, right? Earnings is an idea. It goes back. There's no physical necessarily. These are all ideas, like you're saying. They're all in people's imaginations. These are all ideas. Money, for instance, you're getting. If you get one more year of education, these are all ideas. They're not physical things, but they are. What we go and estimate there is an average, and we of course, in economics, we're very mindful of the fact that the world is very different. If perhaps if I have one more year of college, will be a different effect in my earnings than if you have one more year of college. It will be different across people. But we are still, unfortunately, in building the science that talks about this degrees of variance, a variation across people. We're still crawling, but there are different methods over the science depending on how hard it is to make sense of the world in a more objective way. There are methods of science that have created new tools and new ways of seeing the world, like probability, like statistics, but many other ways to make sense of the world. How can I still talk a little bit about subjectivity, but not yet
I
fully?
agree with
Because
all of
again,
that.
subjectivity is complex, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. You're trying, but then if you notice, that could be another definition of consciousness because consciousness is that which requires you to use indirect methods to understand what's going on. Because the more consciousness is involved with the system you are studying, the more indirect you can make objective measurements, but they're still indirect measurements. You can get a number that is very objective, but they're still indirect. They're still going tangentially, like they're not able to see the real phenomenon, the thing that is going on, because of the physical constraints of this world, and because like in physics, like if you're studying two rocks bumping into each other, the 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 level of consciousness in that system is practically null. So you can study the system very objectively and very directly, I would say, because everything is objective, but you can study it very directly, even though they still use statistics and probabilities to like and sigmas to ascertain whether or not that which they're measuring is real or not, even in physics, which is probably the most direct science in a sense. And then you start going to biology, even chemistry. There might be some consciousness there, and the more consciousness is in the system, the less directly you can measure, you can understand what's going on, because consciousness is just that which has an impact on the system that you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, but I would say that consciousness is one specifics. Like for instance, like in economics, whenever I am estimating the causal effect of college on earnings, of course, I'm only observing things in my data set that are emergent, right? They are not fundamental units. Like there is something that created a social norm across a lots of individuals, of course, but create a social norm that we call education or college. There's another thing that created another social norm called earnings. And we all are measuring this aggregated kind of stuff. And we find through probability that there's some important connection there, not only a
Right.
correlation, but you can actually uh, make sense of the world with a causal connection there. Now, that is so in economics is I cannot find a single example where we do not measure things indirectly. We can only measure
Exactly.
things indirectly.
Because it's
In
all about
in
consciousness. It's all conscious beings that you're measuring all the time.
Yeah, it just happens that in economics, those two things come together: the complexity of it together with conscious beings. But my question to you is there another system that is sufficiently complex? Of course there is, right? Like for instance, in chaos theory, we deal a lot with situations that are not necessarily depending on consciousness. So we can think perhaps about how a water goes from point A to point B in a mountain, for instance, right? I mean, let's just assume just
Going
for a
downhill, you
second.
mean? Okay. Or
Yeah, yeah,
evaporate.
yeah. Going downhill. Sorry. So let's just assume for a second that there's no consciousness in that particular mountain in the water. Just for a second.
Okay.
So you could. That process is so complex that there are certain the the particles, the way they connect with each other, create an emergent system that is sufficiently complex that is really hard to predict from the initial stuff, from the very basic stuff, right? That's why we
But
usually
it's still
try to predict.
deterministic. I think that's
Sure.
maybe the concept we could use here. So
Okay.
that system, even though it's super complex, for all we know, it's still deterministic. Whereas in economic system, I'll propose, I'll suggest that that system is non-deterministic, even though we might believe it is. And there's because within inside the complexity makes it hard for us to see and
Yeah.
understand what's going on, right? Because I think the determinism is a very important definition here, in very important way to see things, because you can have a very complex system which is very difficult for our brain to make sense of, but that's still deterministic. We just don't really know what the variables are and how to measure them all.
Yes.
And then we have systems that are, in my opinion, my philosophy at least, they are intrinsically non-deterministic. Wherever you have human beings in consciousness, you're going to have non-deterministic systems
Why? So I
because
understand
of the
the
nature
logic
of
about. Yeah, yeah.
because of the nature of humans. Because it goes back to the original question of my book: is the brain creating consciousness, or is it consciousness creating the brain? Right? If the brain is creating consciousness, then consciousness, whatever it is, it's a deterministic thing because, as far as we know, the brain is deterministic, and it has a deterministic work operation. Even though people are now claiming that there are quantum effects like microtubules and things like that, which would render the brain less deterministic, more like a probabilistic, perhaps, because then quantum phenomena would be having a say there. But if you think of AI, for example, is AI deterministic? For all we know, it is deterministic because it's based on very well established laws of physics, right? And then if we knew if we could make sense of all the complexity behind it, we, in theory, in thesis, would be able to know exactly what the output of the AI system would be, right? That's a deterministic system. So AI,
You
right
know,
now, they're
but that's
believed
what
to
I'm
be
saying. Like,
deterministic. So the
sure, sure,
brain
but
also is believed to be deterministic, and that's how it should be if you use the science's axioms.
but there
It's
are
to be
things that are
determined.
deterministic and yet unpredictable, right? So that's
By
the
definition,
concern.
by definition, even if you could have the necessary information about that system.
I do not know enough about chaos theory, but it was my understanding that there is a subset of problems that are unpredictable. They are not necessarily non-deterministic. Of course, if it's non-deterministic, it will be
The
unpredictable.
thing is that
But
if it's non-deterministic, then there is variability, there is randomness. And then what is the
yes,
source of that randomness?
yeah,
Which takes you to the conversation about random numbers. What are the true sources of random numbers? And as far as I know, the only true source of random numbers is quantum phenomena. Quantum computers
I
are
do
like
not know
that's what they
this.
do best. They're able to generate quantum numbers. Classic computers don't generate quantum numbers. They can't by definition because
Yeah,
they are deterministic machines. So they cannot be random.
no, I think the word random and unpredictable, they mean different things. That's what I'm saying.
Could be,
But
yeah.
I see what you mean. So okay, so let me try to understand because this is interesting what you're saying. So is there can you point to a particular
And it's
experience to the
related to
extent that you
free
can?
will, to the idea of free
Yeah,
will.
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about free will in that sense because I do if you start from the axiom that everything is deterministic, you just don't understand yet about what is the reason why I do this with my finger or something like that, right? Or why am I even uh, walking or something like that? If you don't understand, uh, even though you don't understand, we do know that there is a vector of initial inputs that everything is deterministic, then I think it's fair to say that the whole idea of that there is a free will, it's hard to believe, right? If everything is fully deterministic, that's what I mean.
There's no space for free will. You might have will,
Exactly.
but it's determined.
That's right. Exactly.
Deterministic will. You
That
have
is
to
right.
want something. Yes.
Yes, but now there are two. So let's just create a partition here, right? Because now there's two different possibilities for randomness. There is randomness that is outside of my control, and there is randomness that is inside my control.
Right.
Uh, so still, there wouldn't be free will if the randomness aspect is outside of my control. Like, for instance, you and I did not choose to be born in Brazil, or we will not choose to be born in the 1970s, or right? Uh, I could have been born in completely different era, like 1,000 years ago. At least that is it's unless you go to more esoteric
Yeah,
ideas
my
of
daughter
karma.
tells me that she didn't ask to be born.
Exactly.
Okay, so I get the
Yeah.
point.
Uh, so again, I cannot falsify the idea that there is no free will. If you ask me, and if I had to say something, my guess would be that there is no free will. But it does appear to me that you are suggesting There's no free will. As in, I believe that there's no free will because every time it's almost like the god of the gaps for me. Every time I think that there's something that is my doing, I find out that that I'm a complier of something that happened in my brain that make
For me,
I
there is
have
free
the right
will.
energy at the moment and so on.
Yeah, I believe in free will, even though I just said that we shouldn't believe in anything. But per my philosophy, there is
Tell
free
me, yeah,
will.
exactly.
And that's the
What is the
source of
randomness?
existence. That's
Yeah,
actually the source of existence. It's free will.
but what does that mean? The source of existence?
The source of existence because for free will to be really free, it has to be fundamental. Does that make sense? Because if you already have
Yeah,
structure in your reality, then you're not free anymore. You're already
yeah.
conditional to the structure.
I agree with the logic. Yeah,
Yeah, so for consciousness to exist, that that free will becomes the most probably the most fundamental property of consciousness. Whatever consciousness is, it has free will because it exists out of its own will. And where does will come from? Doesn't come from anywhere. Like that free will is the most fundamental thing because that's the only way it can be truly free.
but that is under the axiom that consciousness came first, right? If you think
Yes,
that, yeah, if consciousness came as an emergence property or out of,
then it's not
uh,
free.
then exactly.
Yeah.
So I do understand that your philosophy is self-coherent, is logic, and I do agree that
Thanks.
no, I do agree with your point that
I feel
I
less
think
crazy now.
no, because I
I'm
think
just
that's
kidding.
from my perspective. I try to find criteria that I can put a finger on it, right?
Yeah,
Because there are some ideas out there that appear to be like, for instance, like you just talked about the simulation. They appear to
right.
be really out there. So it's really hard for me to falsify anything there, except things that are basic that I can put a finger on it. As in, can I find internal logic through it and things like that? And
And I
I
cannot
do find
falsify the idea that matter is fundamental.
exactly. We
And
can't.
then we
And
can get back to the question. So how do you pick one? I can answer that too if you like. But
yeah, because that's exactly, this is a good question because that for me, I tend to be more like almost like an what do you call it? Like agnostic monism or something like that, because that's where I stop by and say, okay, so it looks like this is a possibility. It looks like the other one is really a possibility. I just don't have any data to support one or the other, so I'd rather step back and be okay with the possibility that is either one of them or perhaps a third, which I don't know yet. A third
yeah.
potential.
So I'm gonna tell the way I do it,
Yeah.
right? So as I mentioned before, I don't come from a place of faith or believing. I come from a place of curiosity. So I spend half of my life assuming that physicality was fundamental and that there's no free will. I've argued for the fact that the brain is creating consciousness and therefore there's no free will because the brain is a deterministic machine and all of
Yeah.
that. And as far as we can tell, most of our brain is in fact deterministic, and because AI is a pretty awesome replication of our brain. Like, in my opinion, has passed the Turing test. So if I'm talking to AI and I didn't know that it's AI, I would say it's a human, or maybe I'll be suspicious because it's too smart to be a human, uh, right? But
Yeah.
in my opinion, has passed the Turing test already. So so a lot of what our brains do, AI already does. So there is an argument right there for yeah, our brain's deterministic, and we've tackled we've discovered how the brain works because we're able to replicate it. So how what better argument could you have than that, right? The only problem, which is beyond that no unconscious or no system that is not provided, not that doesn't have any consciousness would ask is like a if the world was really all about physicality, then we would have solved like the biggest mystery of all, I think, in my opinion, which made me go to medical school, neurology, neuroscience, brain mapping, all of that. I wanted to understand how the brain creates consciousness. But if there is no such thing as consciousness, because the question isn't there, because we are not a conscious researcher, then we've answered everything at this point, because we have a pretty good idea of how the brain works now that we see another machine working in a very similar way and producing a very similar type of output. The thing is that the problem is that we are conscious beings. Fuck, we have pain, we feel pain, we feel all of this, we have all of this internal reality, all of this subjectivity that an unconscious system will never know about. They'll think that an unconscious system will think, well, I figured it out. That's AI, it's how it works. I know how the brain works, I know how the universe works, it's all figured out. But we are conscious beings. So how did I make my choice? I didn't start believing that consciousness is fundamental. I just decided, I just realized, well, there are two realities here, at least, and scientific instruments cannot discover the existence, because even in your systems, Greg, like you don't have them. You can all do all of the probability, all of the analysis, all of the data crunching, but the method wouldn't allow you to discover subjective phenomena. Your method would always be dealing with complexity. You never discover the subjectivity behind the complexity. For that, you
I do
need.
agree. I do agree that in our setup, for instance, it's always going to be an emergent phenomenon, right? But like for instance, the part that I'm still not there with you is so. It, like for instance, if you go back to 1,000 years ago, what we called physical did not involve electromagnetism and electricity, things like that. But now we understand a few things that we include that as part of physics. So
Right.
I really do not know enough research in about how we study the brain, but I do understand a lot about causality, not only in economics but in general. And
Right.
my understanding is that w- the it's most of the brain research is correlational with the networks and
Yeah.
understanding the
Neurocorrelates. Exactly. That's what I
exactly.
used to map. Yeah.
So we are still sort of crawling in science and understanding how we go from correlation to causality, particularly networks, which are really studying causality
Yeah, I think
networks
we're on the
is
same
just
page. Are we
non-trivial.
going to
Yeah,
evolve in knowledge, in knowing to the
yeah.
point where we can understand the better understand the nature of consciousness? I think so. Could you, yeah, could you discover that or make sense of that understanding if you are not a conscious being yourself? I'm not sure. I don't think you would. It's like,
I do understand. I do agree with your point. I think it's almost like a fundamental. In math, we talk a lot about this idea of fixed point theorem there, which is it's really hard for you to Gödel's impossibility theory is very related to this idea. It's like there are certain sets of axioms that you have, and you cannot, under that system, to prove your axioms to be right or wrong. You really
yeah, because
can't.
they are probably the ones sustaining the system, the method, or the
That
approach.
is right. That is right. This is why, for instance, that what you just said is why I am so keen in understanding approach that are different, right? Different sets of axioms to see to look at the world, because they give us a different perspective of the world, not under that axiom For at
Yes.
least it allows the possibility for us to even kind of stress test those axioms that we hold so dear in under physicalism,
So
right?
essentially, that's what I did. I realized it's not going to be in my lifetime that I'm going to understand or have a better idea on the nature of the of consciousness. So let me make an assumption here, because I still don't think science in the way it works will take us to that understanding. I think that a lot of the understanding about reality, it has to be lived. There's no science that can replace the conscious experience. Like I think of the rainbow. The rainbow is super well understood scientifically. I don't think there's any question behind like a left to answer about the phenomenon of the rainbow. But if you don't see, you can still, there's no way you can make sense of what the rainbow is. Like you have to see it to make sense of it. Otherwise, okay, I understand. Okay, you're saying that there is this whole refraction and like a light is spreading, scattering in different colors and all of that. But like, what is color? Like, there's no. It's not because we lack the scientific means that we cannot explain someone who can see what color is. It's not. It's not lack of scientific acumen. It's something else. It's something more
But
fundamental. And
isn't there a, I'm just trying to see to do some stress test on the axiom of physicalism, right? Isn't there a possibility also that in the future, with enough sensors, enough technology, we are going to be able to describe with sufficiently, perhaps not perfect accuracy, but sufficient accuracy, this kind of function that we have evolved to have in our, because essentially we see whatever reality is. We don't know what reality is, but we see whatever reality is. We see this compressed version of reality that we see, and we have certain kinds of interpretations of it,
but what
certain
does a
kinds of
sensor
labels
do?
of it.
A sensor essentially plots data on a chart. That's what sensors do. Like they cannot convey the conscious experience of living the data.
But I think
Seeing
part of
the
the problem
rainbow
is the
is
consciousness, right?
like you can
I'm,
measure data or you can experience the data.
but
When you see the
this
rainbow,
reminds
you're
me.
experiencing the data.
I understand what you're saying, but this reminds me of what you were talking about a few minutes ago about the Turing test, right? Is it possible that perhaps we're going to be able to find something that the same way as you cannot understand whether that person is a human being or whether the person is an AI, you wouldn't be able to see whether you are experience something directly or whether you are experiences this kind of fake thing.
Yeah, you can do that. But okay, let's say let's say you can right now you can take a dolphin's brain and map that brain and do some fMRI on that dolphin's brain, and you can tell right now I know this dolphin is echolocating, right? You have the sensors, you have everything, and you can tell, oh, this dolphin is echolocating right now. I can see the neural activity here, and I know because of the clicks that it's doing, it's processing that information that it's receiving. And then I still ask you, do you know how it feels like to have echolocation?
No, because we don't know the counterfactual. We don't know causality. What you're saying is just a prediction of a world that actually happened. You do not know the prediction of a counterfactual. Like what would be
No,
Greg in that world of being of having echolocation?
no,
I do not
I'm
know that.
telling you
That's a very hard question, right?
yeah, what I'm telling you is that you can have all the sensors measuring the phenomenon. Phenomenon is right there. You're measuring echolocation. Still, you don't know. You haven't had access to information, which is like you haven't had access to knowing how having echolocation feels like. That's something science cannot reveal to you.
Uh,
Science could,
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Like for instance,
but
there
how
I
come?
can. Okay, so let me make it clear what I don't agree, because I agree with almost everything you just said. Just one aspect.
Right.
So
Okay.
so let me give you an example in economics. I'm not saying that we are able to do that, because economics is just crawling as a science, but but the current understanding among scientists is that there are certain causal questions that I can understand precisely. The following counterfactual: what would have happened to my earnings had I taken an undergraduate at Harvard versus the actual undergraduate that I did have? And that undergraduate, I never took my undergraduate at Harvard, right? So that is a completely parallel world that, as far as I know, has never existed. The Greg Caetano having taken a PhD, undergraduate at Harvard. And yet I can precisely do that. In principle, I can precisely estimate that world. And I can precisely, if I were to have had that experience, let's say somehow I'm God and I go back in the world, God tells me to go back in the world and actually go and get to undergraduate, I could verify that indeed I actually will experience exactly the kind of life that I predicted to have. So that is a counterfactual. That is, we cannot, this is such a hard kind of prediction that if I just measure how it is my life taking an undergraduate in Brazil, it's going to be really, it's so far off from the space. So it's going to be really hard for us to understand the counterfactual. What I was suggesting is that yes, if you just show the correlation of a dolphin and their brains, and if you have a hard time understanding, I don't even know how to model causality in such a world like that, to understand what would have been the counterfactual of, you see the correlations of Greg doing nothing, like just talking right now in my brain, the correlation of a dolphin doing echolocation, and you need to create a model that shows what would have been the the uh, the specific uh, network of neurons that Greg would have had under an echolocation.
We're not
What
talking
I'm
about
saying
the
is
same
that,
thing, Greg.
okay,
Sorry,
okay,
but we're not talking about the same thing.
yeah, tell me.
Okay, let's go step by step. Do you agree that there is a phenomenon called echolocation?
Yes.
Do you agree that there is a reality to experiencing that phenomenon?
Yes, and I have read the philosophy book about what it is to be a bat.
Yeah.
I am very familiar with this. So what I'm
So why
saying
did you
is
go
that
to
this
causation and stuff? Because it's not about
exactly.
that.
I I would say that with the current understanding of what subjective experience is, I it's not clear to me that subjective experience cannot. If I were to guess, I would say yes. It's really, I cannot even envision how one goes about measuring subjective experience in a way that becomes objective enough, as in replicable enough, and blah blah blah. I understand it's really hard to even think about that, but there are other things that we did call impossible, and even I would say even we for a while thought they were sort of subjective, that it's more objective now. Like some people used to not see things,
So
and we
you're
would
saying that
describe people how
eventually
seeing, and now they can see things, for
you're
instance.
saying that essentially subjectivity will become objectified by science, and science will be able to measure subjectivity.
Yeah, I'm not saying that this will happen. I'm saying that shutting off the chance that this will happen, I just don't see the reason why you would shut this off.
Well, I would don't. I'm open. If
Yeah.
whatever, like if people want to spend their lives trying to gather, like a good luck with that. But why would you bother in the first place when you can have the experience directly? I think that's one question. And then because there is a reality of experiencing echolocation. So the only way I see to know what it feels like to experience echolocation is if you like wire your brain in a certain way connected to an echolocation device that would allow you to have that experience. Science can do that. Science can do that for you. Science can go there and change your brain in such a way that you now have echolocation. And now you know how it feels like having echolocation. But still, an AI scientist on the other side, who the AI scientist who created the whole thing for you, the whole device, and rewire your brain for you to have a echolocation, would still be asking you, so how does it feel like? Does it feel like more seeing? Does it feel more like hearing? And let alone that the science has no idea, the AI science has no idea what seeing and hearing feels like. And so what I'm saying is that there is a realm of science, a realm of reality that is out of the reach of technology. So leave the science word aside. Let's talk technology then. Technology cannot inform you about something that if you haven't about some certain types of phenomena that exist unless you have felt it, because we have five senses, right? So let's say there's another sense now, or echolocation is a good example still, like but echolocation is a sense that we know to exist because we're able to find the correlates. But there could be other qualia out there that will be impossible for us to know that they exist based on what we know about reality, the physical reality. And then how would you use technology to discover those? The only way I see is by technology tampering with your brain and then start giving you all sorts of
But
experiences
that is
and
the but that is the meta point that I'm trying to make, right? Going back to Hoffman's point, we cannot make statements about reality, like I'm talking about ontology, based on the limits of our epistemics, because
yeah.
all the evidence we are suggesting is that we are very dumb in terms of understanding reality. We are very
Right.
limited. So, if you say, how can I conceive something? My short answer is I can't. I can't conceive. But that should not be an argument for why I should believe that reality is something like that. You see? So I
Well,
agree that this is a
you shouldn't believe
possibility.
in anything again. So what I
Yeah.
did in my case, I made a decision. Like I made a
Yeah.
choice.
I understand.
So either reality is based on physicality, or reality is based on consciousness. And I thought, well, I know enough about this world, which is based on physicality being fundamental. And it's not really a world that I enjoy that much because it's a world
Hmm.
full of fear of death, full of war, full of competition for resources, everything coming from that same premise that physicality is the most fundamental thing. And then I decided, well, maybe let me give a try and build a life around the other assumption that consciousness is fundamental. Because in reality, all that I know is that I exist, that I'm conscious. So it's not that much of a stretch to make that assumption. Like I don't know, I know nothing about an electron. Maybe an electron exists, but I couldn't care less. I know that I exist. That much I know. I know that there is someone here. There is like an experience.
There's at least one person
At least,
speaking here
at
today.
least me. At least I know
That's
that I
true.
exist. That the electron can decide if they exist or not because they keep popping in and popping out of existence. So will I give like my whole assumption about what's real to an electron, stupid electron? No. Like I choose myself. I choose to decide that I exist, not the electron exists. Electrons are too crazy for me to decide that they are the real deal. Seriously, like how you have to be very dumb to decide that the electrons are the real thing. Seriously, or atoms, like you decide
Why?
that you are what? Because they are
Why?
unpredictable. You don't know that if they really exist. You think that a
But why?
table exists.
Why? But why is there a need to collect a pattern about like I understand that this is a possibility, but why should our taste about whether something is dumb or not dumb is tell us about any
The
ontology?
dumb was just a joke.
I know, yeah,
Just
yeah. But
yeah, it
this
was
is the
just a
issue. Like
joke. I'm not gonna make an
like
argument
I,
about
so
that.
I think part of the thing here, which I really appreciate what you just said here, because I think it's entirely possible that believing in what I'm saying, like having like living a life under certain axioms, for one person can get you to have a much better life than another axiom.
Yeah,
And
of
I think
course. Because you create your life the whole time. It's
it's
based on
actually
what you believe.
yeah, I think it's a being honest about that this does not necessarily state any ontology, but rather this is how I, practically speaking, this is a great life I can live and so on. I actually do a lot of that with things like, for instance, so this is an example related to the conversation we had before. I truly don't believe in free will, okay? Although I do, based on what we just,
It's
one thing I
probably
found
because
out today.
you're not talking
No, no,
about the
no.
same thing. There's no
Yeah,
free
no.
want. There's
No,
no
no, no.
free
I don't
want.
believe in free will in the sense that what I said before, but now I need to step back because, like I said, under that other axiom that we just talked about, the axiom of consciousness, I see the need for some randomness there. So, so yes, I
Or
think there's a
freedom.
possibility.
Because quantum
Yeah,
mechanics give us the randomness
yeah,
already. I think what we're really needing here is freedom. Because freedom is different than randomness. Freedom is about intent. It's about like a building. It's about creating. And creation is not necessarily random. It can be influenced
yeah. I
by
don't mean
stuff.
randomness. I don't mean any. I meant actually free will, as in it's something something that is my outcome, my current outcome is my doing in any way.
Yeah.
But going back to the idea, if I don't believe in free will, I think uh, there are some implications about what we were just talking about. Uh, that
But for you to believe or not in free will, you're saying essentially that you don't believe because that's a consequence of a more fundamental belief. Because maybe you don't see the mechanism for free will to exist, right? Because it's all deterministic. You see all of the complexity and the constraints, and nothing is free here. And I agree with that. And I think that our minds are not free. Free will doesn't exist at the mind level. It doesn't
yeah,
exist at the
if I
brain
were to
level.
state, yeah, no, I agree with what you just said. If I were to state my current view about this, it's not like I don't believe in free will, but I believe that we, at any point in time, I tend to overestimate the scope of my free will. As in, it's always lower.
Yes.
In
Yeah, it
reality,
makes
it's
sense
always going
for
to be
your line of
less.
study to assume that, and I think it's right. We have so much like a subliminal influence that we don't have access to consciously. I
Exactly,
agree with
exactly.
that.
But it is true that on my daily basis, when I'm at, I guess, my almost most rational self, I tend to say that this whole thing converges to zero. You see what I mean? And as in, there's no free will. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that I have the tendency to do that.
On many levels, I don't think there is free will either. Yeah, on many levels, I don't think there is. That's why you have to. That's why meditation is one of those methods. There are several. There are ways to allow your higher self, if you think of that, because if you assume consciousness to be fundamental, and consciousness to exist in a very low structure kind of reality, then there is and you exist as a manifestation of that, the whole reality, the whole physical reality existing as a manifestation in consciousness, then you have to accept, and I have to accept that me as Daniel in this body and this brain, I'm very detached from that more fundamental structure or lack of a more fundamental thing, which is probably, I don't know, maybe it's the monad state that I felt in my near-death experience.
Mhm.
But there is such a thing as me at a higher level because that's what's projecting my existence here on this earth, on this 3D plane, so to speak. Because this
Yeah, yeah.
3D,
So I,
if
I,
this 3D
I
plane is not the most fundamental thing, then there is something projecting me here. And that's not, and
Yeah.
that's who I consider to be my true self, my higher self, which could be the same as your true self. Maybe they are not separated at all at the consciousness level.
I really appreciate this conversation because one of the reasons why I think there's a lot of discordance in the world is that people don't agree on what their objective is. So, for instance, I think we agree on everything, and the only moment we disagree on things, I ended up realizing why, which is it's because you and I, whenever we were talking about certain things that we disagreed on, you and I had a different goal. So, for instance, I was still thinking about the ontology goal, like what is real, and let me give you an example. I really, like I just said, I don't believe in free will, and yet I try to live my life based on Stoicism principles because I think you can live a good life like that. But if you think
Uh-huh.
about the whole idea of Stoicism, contradicts the notion of no free will, right? Because the idea of Stoicism is that you have to focus on what you can control and you don't focus on what you cannot control. But if I were truly believe that I cannot control anything, so what am I doing in my life? You know what I mean? And yet I really tried. I mean, if you think about me at my very best, trying to be mindful of my life and so on, I'm trying to live by Stoicism principles.
I
And
think it's
yet,
very hard to make sense of the world if we assume us to be just machines. It doesn't make any sense. We're not just machines. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. There is something more to it.
uh, I wouldn't go saying the last sentence. I think it doesn't make any sense. I think
Uh,
that makes, I totally agree up to that. But I don't think making sense should be a criterion to speak about ontology. That's what I mean.
yeah, I agree with that. But I still think that if you are to choose a fundamental real thing,
Yeah, I agree.
I'll definitely pick consciousness rather on like a
No, I see
before
what
I
you
pick
mean.
the electron.
No, I see what you mean. I think you can build a lot of ideas. So I have seen in your channel, you can build a lot of good ideas inside that axiom, and you
Yeah.
actually can provide a lot of guiding about how to live a good life. I see that. I
And
totally
that's the
see this
point
part.
of the school of consciousness that I'm creating now.
Yeah,
Because
tell me a little bit about that.
I want to teach people. I mean, not that I know all of the answers, but at least I want to teach the framework so they can create their own lives in that framework. The school of consciousness is called Consciousness Alma, and it's
Almas in so in Portuguese.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like alma mater.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, same alma. Consciousness Alma. And consciousnessalma.com is the website. And the idea is very simple and difficult. It's to help people build a life around a different assumption, essentially. So the course that I am working on is going to be the inaugural course of the school. It's called Life Design. It's how to design your life based on the assumption that consciousness is fundamental, not the electron.
Mhm.
And because from my experience, when we start living out of from that assumption, your life becomes much better, essentially. So it doesn't need to be true from that perspective. It doesn't need to be the real deal. But just because it leads to happier results than assuming the electron is real, I just because of that, I tend to assert more reality to that, more fundamental reality to that choice than the alternative choice.
Well, what do people call it is true because it works? They call this in magic as this is a
Well,
famous
it
principle
works
in
in
magic.
medicine. You don't know
It
how
is
the
true
drug
if it is
works,
true. Yeah, if it
but it
works, then it's
works.
true.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And then I'm not sure there is such a thing as the truth. You know, the truth
Yeah,
is a very difficult thing to define
I
because
agree. I agree.
because
That is an axiom if you think about it, right? That
yeah,
is an
exactly.
actually axiom.
Because the truth, and people say, well, again, there against facts there are no arguments, but the truth and the very existence of facts is also based on the idea that reality is essentially fixed. It's a fixed framework. So there's no variability, there's no randomness, there's no nothing, and then you know everything, so you know the truth. Like, but if you understand the complexity of it all, that there is randomness, that there is quantum effects, that there is consciousness, and all of that, then it gets really hard to ascertain that a fact is a fact. Let alone that we could be living in multiple universes at the same time,
Yeah,
parallel
I
realities and
guess
things
our
like that.
idea, I guess our
Yeah.
idea of truth have as we understood more probability and other forms of other tools, like for instance, uh, in economics there is a concept called equilibrium,
Hmm.
which is exactly is another way that we can actually another tool that we use like probability to understand truth that is allows for variation over time. You know, an equilibrium could be a dynamic equilibrium, but it's
Hmm.
still truth. The whole the trajectory is true. You see, not necessarily just it's a stable. So, but at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I agree that there's this uniqueness of truth, which is an axiom, right?
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
otherwise,
Yeah.
there's a reason why we are searching for it because apparently first there is an existence, which I guess it's an axiom too, and there's uniqueness.
Yeah. I think
It's funny.
it's all about it works better than that. That this idea works better than that idea. That's why science is so successful because it works so well. But then if you stop and pay attention, you see that it works very well for certain kind of things. And
I agree.
the less consciousness is involved in science, the more it works. The more consciousness is involved, like economics, the more difficult it is to find the signal in the noise. And I think that signal versus noise is kind of a good
Yeah, I would
paradigm.
say I would call that everything you said. I agree. I would not necessarily be married to the idea that it's about consciousness. It's about complex systems. Physics, most
Well,
systems in
you
physics are
have to
not
be married
complex.
to the idea when it's like when you decide to marry someone, you're making a choice. And I made the choice of assuming that consciousness is fundamental. So from my perspective, I'm married to
Yeah,
that
yeah, exactly.
for
But like for
now.
instance, I
But I can always get
meteorology,
divorced.
meteorology is very bad in terms of prediction power, and I wouldn't necessarily say that there is at
Much
least
better
like
than it was, right?
economics is much better than it was too.
Yeah.
The problem is that we could talk about this in the future. Part of the problem with economics is that people give us too much power to make decisions where, and there's a whole incentive for the academics that like to fake uncertainty to be in power, and the academics that would like to
Fake uncertainty or fake certainty?
for fake certainty. The
Yeah.
academics that are more epistemic
But you know
humble,
what?
they don't get power. The
This is
academics
this
that
is this is
pretend to be
this is society's fault
yeah.
because I remember once I was working as an associate in a private equity fund. And at that time, I had just come from academia and I was very scientific. So people will ask me, so what do you think about this investment thesis here? And I would give them my scientific answer, which is contains lots of uncertainty, probability, and all of that.
On the one
If
hand, on the other hand,
if you are a grown up, you listen to that and you make sense of that. If you are like a stupid Wall Street person who they want certain. No, I want your opinion. Like, is it should I invest or not invest? And then, like, in a sense, it's nice because they are valuing all of your consciousness thing, all of your subconscious input, all of your life experience to give them like it's a go. And that's what people want. Same thing with patients. When I was a physician, like you can be the type of physician that gives them the scientific answer. Like you're gonna have zero patients. Like people don't want that. They want reassurance.
I
They
agree.
want, and it's funny because the other day I was called to jury duty, and it was fortunately I didn't stay for the full trial, but it was this doctor being sued, and and then the lawyers started asking like about it was the case was around around the doctor have being too optimistic to the patient or to the family. And then that's kind of fucked up because like that's what's expected. That's what people expect from us, from doctors, from
That
scientists.
doctor is a bundle of two things, right? He needs to be the scientist in the room, but he needs to manage emotions, right? It's
Exactly.
complicated.
So society like is a bunch of like they expect us to give the answer. It's like they're always looking for a god. They're always looking for like the certainty, the stability. It's all about their insecurities. And where does that come from? It comes from a physical materialistic perspective of the world because they didn't need to be that insecure. They could just live with the idea that they should just trust their life, just trust consciousness. Everything's going to be all right even if you die. Everything's fine, but that's not something they can make sense of. And because they want reassurance of what? That you exist, that you're gonna live. What do you want a reassurance about? Like it's same with the economy. Like what do you want? Do you want to do you want to know that you're gonna keep having money, that you're not gonna get poor? This is coming from external factors, not from your own creation of your life. So and we live in a very ignorant world. And it's just all it takes is, and you see like it makes the entire difference just making a different assumption. It's just one assumption. Of course, it's a fundamental basic assumption from where everything else derives, but it's one assumption. And you pick one assumption, you are on a certain route. You pick another assumption based on the same intelligences, the same brains, the same reasoning, the same logics, the same capacity, and you get to a totally different world just because you used a different assumption. So we should be discussing much more the assumptions that we make around about the world and reality than we are. And because we don't, people just and they think they're not assuming anything, but no, they are. Like it's super ingrained in our systems. All of our systems are ingrained in this assumption. Curiously enough, probably the most stupid of all systems, which is for me the legal system, is actually based on the assumption that we are conscious beings. Because if there is no free will, that wouldn't even make sense to trial people. Like why you're trying them if they don't have the will to do or not a crime? It's like it's not a matter. I mean, you can arrest them to prevent them from doing the same crime again, but not to punish them because there's no point punishing someone if they don't have any free will, right? So curiously enough, the legal
Yeah,
system is based.
at least I cannot see a logical argument under no free will to punishment. I do see an argument for incarceration just because you need to
Exactly.
incapacitate the person to
Isolate.
continue committing crimes and harming
Yeah,
other
you want to
people.
prevent new events,
Yeah,
right?
but not punishment per se. Exactly.
But the whole legal system is
At least I
about
cannot see
punishing.
the logic. Yeah,
It's about
but
punishing so much so that they will give you like 200 years of prison. Like you cannot even live that long. So that's not about isolating the person and preventing them from. That's about
yeah,
punishing more than you could. Like I wish I could punish him more, but I can't.
you know,
It's like a
I kind of like I I actually, at least to the extent that I can see things, I see how this axiomatic perspective can be fruitful for a lot of people in the way they might design their life, and they might have a different lifestyle based on those assumptions. So I
But
also
isn't that
think
funny to
it's
realize that there is a system like the legal one? Sorry, I'll get you back to
yeah.
that.
Go ahead.
But isn't that interesting to realize that there is such a system, and it's very important in our world, that is rational, it's logical, it's evidence based, even, and it's based on the fact that we are conscious beings, which is the legal system. So those things are not contradictory. You can assume that something is that you can make a choice of assuming consciousness is fundamental,
But there are
and you still
many
have.
but there are
What?
many technologies, many institutions that got created based on that. Besides lawyer, like for instance, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but in your book you even mentioned the idea of anesthesia, right? As in, imagine if we don't believe in pain, why are we all having anesthesia, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not such a not like a stretch to assume that consciousness is
Exactly, I
fundamental.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do agree, though. I agree with your saying, and I particularly agreed about how it could be fruitful to live your life based on that, even if that turned out not to be the correct ontology. Although, like I said, I have from where I standing, I think this model of reality is I have no reason to believe that this model of reality is less true than the model of reality that we currently believe most people believe in physics.
I don't have the
I
means to
I
prove
also
either
don't
way.
I from where I stand I don't see the other way around either, honestly.
Yeah.
But I can see the argument for why
That's
many
why the
people
book is called
live a
Spirit
very good life.
Duality. Because it's a
Exactly.
duality. Like
Exactly.
you cannot have both. You have to pick one.
No, that's the thing. Why? Like for instance, I think for instance, the argument that the argument that I would make is that you can live a very good life
With
by
both.
just being compression aware, by just
Yeah, I agree
being
with that. Like
epistemic humble, and just be say, I do not know for sure about that
it,
one is true or not. But on the other hand, that all these issues that you mentioned before about society can be traced to lack of epistemic humility. They really
it's yeah.
believe for sure that the world is the way it is.
It's like a
And
scientist who believes in God, right? It's not necessarily contradictory. You use one set of assumptions to do your work, and another set of assumptions to live your life. It's totally possible. Yeah.
especially because God, each person, I'm pretty sure, defines God in a different way.
Yeah, it's like truth, right? So people and it's so shallow, like all of these conversations, because people go like, "Do you believe in God?" And then
Right.
people say like, "Hey, yes, I believe in God." Oh no, I don't believe in God. I'm agnostic. But they never stop to even define first. Like, let's first define what God is, so I can give a proper
Have
answer.
you ever seen anyone, if you define God like Spinoza or Einstein, have you ever found a person who does not believe in that God, for instance? Are you
I don't know what
kidding
is
me?
the definition. What is the definition?
Just the laws of nature.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. But even that, well, I believe in the laws of nature, but I don't think they're fundamental. I
It's
totally
not the laws of
agree.
physics. There's not the law of physics, the laws of nature, you see? There's no
Yeah,
human
but
made in this.
even the natural world, I think it
Yeah, yeah.
exists within consciousness in a
I
sense,
see. Yeah.
which
This is
is
very
natural,
this
but not what we understand with natural history, natural, you know.
yeah. Man, it's been really fun to talk to you. I hope we have
Likewise.
this a further conversation on this topic. Thanks
Yeah, but
for
this was already a step forward since our last conversation, so we are making progress, I think.
yeah. We are. So I really think that it really helps me understand that the source of any disagreement is mostly related to not ontology, but rather the goal of a conversation. Like for instance,
Isn't that
i- i-
interesting that I don't think we have really disagreed with anything because
yeah,
disagreements, they disagreements, they emerge essentially for political reasons, I think, because someone wants to be right or more right than the other so they can have some sort of advantage, I think. Because if you're really interested in finding the truth, you're not, if both of them are really interested
if
in
the
finding
goal
the
is the same,
truth,
yeah,
they are not going to disagree because they are going to understand the where the other one is coming from and what assumptions they're using, and then
yeah,
if you follow the track, you're gonna go to the same conclusion. It's I
yeah.
agree with
So
you. Like if I
that
follow
is
your
why.
assumptions, I'm gonna agree with you. Yeah.
So that is why, for instance, being epistemic humble for me is key here, right? Because if you were entering a conversation without curiosity, uh, then my goal is to just affect your thoughts, just like be rhetorical goals. Like I have no reason, I'm not listening to you. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
So, but
exactly.
if I am,
Yeah, it's like
if I
a
am
yeah.
allowing myself the possibility that there's something interesting I can hear here, there's a law you can learn, and you can be more adaptable to enter somebody else's axiom system to understand where the person is coming from. So that I think is very helpful.
Everything has to be framed in in a certain way. You need a definition. It's like even to run a computer software, you need to define certain variables first. And that's the same with reality. Like we exist in this reality and we are every conversation starts, whatever the subject, every conversation starts from a point of common understanding. And if the, and people assuming that they're on the same page. And every disagreement comes from they actually not being on the same page. So not
Yeah.
using the same framework. Because if you use
You know,
the same framework, like it can only lead you somewhere. Like it
so
doesn't.
I work a lot in my research on causal inference. I look a lot with Carol, my wife, right?
Mhm.
And she really her perspective is very different from mine in causal inference because I'm an applied person and she's a more theoretical person in causal inference,
Okay.
right? So because I work a lot with her, one thing that I have, it's been 15 years that I have this quote from Bertrand Russell, one of my favorite philosophers besides me, and I use a lot of that because I really, at the heat of the moment when I'm talking to her about research, it's very easy for me to just keep being brittle in my own axiom, right? The quote is this: everything is vague to a degree you do not realize till you have tried to make it precise. And this is related to the conversation that we're having here, right? Because if we are speaking at a level of vagueness, it's very likely that my level of vagueness is going to be different from your level of vagueness. So agreement happens when we somehow figure out to be in the same level of resolution. You see?
Yeah.
That's when agreements tend to happen.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, where I come from in causal inference tends to be more like big picture than where she comes from, because she's the one usually doing the actual proofs, the actual demonstrations in the end. And I am more likely to have some kind of intuition, you see. But then
Mhm.
oftentimes she says, I don't understand. No, this is not true. And again, what she means is I don't understand is different from what I mean by I do not understand. What she means by it's not true is different from what I mean by it's not true. And then
Yeah,
we have
exactly.
to both adapt to converge to, okay, that's what you meant. Yeah, that's true.
But it's like a living society. You never, when there is a will, whether that's free or not, but there is a will to be in good terms and really grow through the interaction, then both will grow. When
That's
there's
true.
no will, and the will is to actually destroy, and that's where we have the world we have today. It's all the conflicts and war and polarization because people want to destroy instead of grow. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. Like you gotta destroy to rebuild, I guess. But
But
you don't need to.
what you're just saying, the polarization and all these issues that we're currently having, that's what led me to start this podcast, because I think that a key, I wouldn't say but a key solution to these issues of polarization is to start the conversation being fully aware that your perspective is a specific compression of reality, is not necessarily the only possible reality.
Oh yeah,
It's just
totally.
a subjective compression of
But this
reality.
is a very basic thing.
Yeah.
If you come from the if you're born in the right family, I guess. But in our society, we don't have that in our society. There's no even will to. It's not about that. I think people deep down they know they could be just having a decent, civilized conversation and being reasonable and getting to a place. But that's not what they want. They actually want the turmoil. That's all they're all about the turmoil.
Well, I don't know. I do not know how to infer intentions, but I would say one thing. I would say like most of our
Well,
institutions, like even like the education system, right, in Brazil or in the US and elsewhere too, w- we create a whole education system suggesting that the world is actually more objective than it actually is. Like, for
Yes.
instance, there's always this scoring systems. There's always, like, for instance, when the teacher goes and asks a question, first of all, there's a question being asked. There is this anticipation that there's a right answer, and that right answer is unique. I mean, in
Yeah.
math, I guess it's unique most of the time, but in many other situations, as you know, it's not unique. When I do research, most of my research, first of all, I'm the one asking a question, and oftentimes this is half of the job. Second, I oftentimes work on years on a question without knowing whether I can find the answer or not. And
Yeah.
third, just to assess whether that answer is correct or not, I am the one figuring that out. There's no teacher telling me, yes, right, yes, wrong. So all these are kind of bubbles that we create in the whole system. And then why on earth I get these college students now, right? Uh, Coming to my classes where they have the best students are naturally selected towards being extremely good in that environment, faking uncertainty, faking certainty, right?
Certainly. Yeah.
And then suddenly, why on earth would they be amazing at this other skill that is almost orthogonal to it, which is the skill of thinking outside of this bubble, right? Why on earth would they be like, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It's just almost like random.
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly. I think that well, the whole polarization and the turmoil comes from two places. One is lack of brightness, I think, because it's not lack of education. Like I used to think that, I used to think that corruption, for example, was due to lack of education. I don't think that anymore. I think education only changes the complexity of the corruption you do. It doesn't uneducated people do basic corruption, educated people do high profile corruption. And I think it's at the end of the day, I think we just for some reason, we just let go of values and principles. And without values and principles anchoring it's like the assumption in your philosophy. If you don't have your values and uh, principles anchoring who your person is, that person cannot be functional, be function properly in society. And we have a whole lot of people who simply let go of their values or chose less honorable values, or values that they're less compatible with the whole and more focused on the individual, which is an illusion too, like that you exist outside of the whole, right? That's not even like a metaphysical thing. Put you in on a desert, like an isolated island. You're nothing. You're only someone because you are part of a whole, right? And anyway,
Yeah, I think the idea, I think we're trying to go with the same goal overall. I think we're using different strategies. But like I said,
who you and I, or
you
the
and I,
society?
we're using different strategies. But I think the key tool that creates
What is the goal? Sorry.
ability for people to talk to each other and to actually grow
Yeah.
together is the idea of being tolerant, right? The idea of being curious and being
Curious,
tolerant to
yeah.
different axioms, and
and
that is,
and
is
fear and
so key to
fearless.
increase
I
the
think at the end of the day,
capacity of
it's
people
all
to talk.
fear. I think we live in a world that is constantly fed by fear, and that's on purpose. Fear comes from everywhere, from news, from politicians, from this divisiveness comes from it's divide and control, right? It comes from creating turmoil so they can control you. Um,
So, like I said, unfortunately, in complex systems like that, even though it's possible that there is intention, in you can have the exact same bad outcome without anybody having bad intentions, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, I
Even
believe
though it's
that.
possible
Yeah.
that somebody can have bad intentions,
Yeah,
but you can
but
easily.
then you see so much bad intention out there that it's kind of difficult not to think that it doesn't make a difference. All of that bad intention out there.
Well, then going back to free will, what is a bad intention except perhaps a person is currently with a perspective that has been a function of a lot of terrible
What is
experiences.
good and bad?
So
In
exactly,
this
no,
case,
no.
in this case, I'm defining it as you putting yourself above the whole, above society. And then when you have enough people putting themselves above the rest, then you get what we have. Is that bad or good? I don't care. But it's to each one their own. You can decide whether you like it or not. But that's the direct consequence of individualism, I think, which is a
Uh,
philosophy like
maybe
okay.
we can talk about this in the future, but that is what you
Yeah.
just said is the actual key reason why most of my research in papers is on ways to reduce inequality of opportunities, because I think that part of the reason why a lot of people could be selfish is actually that some of these people are very low in the pyramids of needs. So, like for instance, I can afford having a conversation like that with you because it's not like I need food for my kids and for my spouse and so on. Right? We have I think about global
I think
warming
there's something else, Greg.
because
I've seen so many miserable people who with the right values and the right principles. And I
sure.
see so many doctors who are totally corrupt. And I don't really I can't, based on my experience, I cannot. I mean, of course, if you don't have your basic needs, you're gonna to be doing stuff, I guess, but not necessarily. Sometimes you
No, no,
just
no.
put up. Yeah.
Of course, you cannot predict based on income. Like, for instance, look at what is happening in the United States. The suicide rates among high income people, for instance, in this country is ridiculously high these days. Of course, my point here is that whatever pyramids of needs you think about in terms of suffering, some people could be suffering a lot in ways that are harder to measure. And I have plenty of videos that I talked about the concern about
I'm not
the
sure.
fact
Like,
that
do you think a poor person who has always been poor suffers more than the rich guy who became poor?
no, I did not say that.
No, I know
It's
you didn't, but I'm
it's
saying
hard to
that
measure subjective well-being, as you very well know. It's very hard to understand suffering across people,
yeah. My
like
point is
because they are reported, right?
Everybody suffers. Suffering is the constant in our world because it's a very underdeveloped world, not economically, spiritually.
Sure, but I think if you were to pick one proxy about suffering, I think one pretty good proxy of suffering would be suicide rates. That's what I'm talking about,
Okay,
and
and yeah.
and that's what I mean by maybe this is something clearly based on what you're saying you already believe in, but a lot of people in economics for a long time thought that a good proxy to reduce suffering would be to make people have more income
Right.
and
That helps.
and right now and it helps but right now we have been
But that's
seeing
a
particularly
materialistic approach. If you don't treat the spiritual side, if you don't come from the other side as well, you only treat the physical side, back to our conversation, you're not going anywhere. People are still going to suffer. They will continue to be suffering forever because it
I
doesn't
wouldn't say
matter.
you don't go anywhere, but there's a big chunk of what we all call our needs to for our happiness that clearly is not gonna. I agree, and this is much harder to measure.
But
I
people
have
with
plenty
all
of
of
videos.
that, they're still unhappy.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So, for instance, what we currently are seeing in this country is that there has been a trend where subjective well-being has either stalled or have gone down in certain regions in this country, and then you look at growth of income in the same regions have gone up. So you find if anything, you might find a negative correlation, which is again, if you were under the axiom that income is a very good proxy of well-being, you would realize there's something wrong here.
It's yeah. Where do you see more suicide then? What did you learn about that metric?
Uh, there has been certain groups of society that, I mean, it's really hard to measure this well because it's not necessarily perfectly well measured, because suicide is a specific kind of death that is labeled based on intention, right?
But you were
but
using it as a
but
correlate of
there
suffering,
has
right?
been some people thinking, there has been some people measuring this, and they are finding that is unusually high for rich people.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Because it's not how much you have that makes you more or suffer more or less. Those things
So
are
but that's the
those
point that I
things are
was making, right?
important. And that's
but
and
but
that's related to
but
my
going back to the
question.
context, going back to the context, you're talking about the lawyers, the physicians. They are terrible people and so on. So what I mean is that we don't know, even if they are rich people like lawyers and physicians, they could be actually having, we don't know their circumstances. That's the truth. We really don't. So it's possible that they, part of the reason why they are thinking only about themselves is because they really are in survival mode. And again, it's really hard to measure,
It's
so I do not
spiritual,
know what to
Greg.
think about that.
It's spiritual. The more you see yourself as the things that are outside of you, the more you're gonna suffer.
So I I would agree is spiritual. It's just that I don't know if you and I define spiritual in the same way. I definitely think it's subjective and
It's
in
the
ways that are
assumption
very
thing.
hard to measure.
If you assume yourself to be your body and your brain, then you are then you are a creation. You are perishable. You are small. If you believe yourself to be that which created this brain and this body and this life, then you're big, you're powerful. It doesn't matter your circumstances, you're gonna build your life around that idea. It all depends on where you're coming from. You come from one assumption, it's one result. You come from another assumption, it's another result, totally different.
Okay, so it does look like you were saying something that I haven't thought before that you were making. So are you trying to make a claim that this specific axiom you're talking about is going to be beneficial for every single individual if they were to do this?
I'm making to do this, making the assumption that consciousness is
If
fundamental
they, exactly, do you think every single individual,
would benefit from
because
that.
I thought before you were making the claim that this will be helpful for you and for a sufficiently large number of group of people that
Any
you
person,
think is worth living your life.
any person.
You
How
think,
can it not be beneficial to know who you truly are? It can only be
no, no,
beneficial.
no, but you're knowing who you truly, again, that's an ontology statement. I thought before we were talking about, we don't know yet if that is true. We just want to use this similar to stoicism, right? As I just stated before, I don't believe in free will, and
But
yet
back to our
I believe
conversation
this is helpful.
about certainty and uncertainty and the investor and the patience. People don't operate at the same level that we're operating here in this conversation. People need to they don't talk about assuming something and then testing, trying that out. People go with belief, and whatever you believe is what you get in life. So if you believe that you are a billionaire and that's what defines you is being a billionaire. That's your identity. The moment you lose everything, you kill yourself because you don't know who you are anymore.
So, so even if everything that you're saying right now is correct, that can be construed under the axiom of physicalism. It's not necessarily construed that
In
you can
physicalism, there
actually be
isn't even
aware.
suffering, Greg.
No,
In
no. What I mean is
physicalism,
that
there is
you,
no suffering. Matter cannot suffer.
no, 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 no. I don't. Again, what I mean by physicalism, I don't think that's what you mean. Also, when you criticize physicalism, you don't mean the current science. You mean if the eventual science, when we have enough capability of detecting all the stuff that we
No,
might
I
call
mean, I mean
physical.
fundamentally, science cannot get there by
Exactly,
fundamental reasons. Yeah.
exactly. But we don't. Well, as I thought we were agreeing to disagree before because we do not. There's no way of you claiming that unless there's a
Claiming
logical
what?
jump there, right? Like I think it's possible that you wouldn't be able to fully detect,
You'll never find
to fully
suffering.
replicate subjectivity,
It's
right?
like pain. It's like pain. You'll never find pain scientifically.
How are you sure of that?
I
I'm
mean, you
actually
just
curious about
just
that.
just propose any like a okay, maybe
Okay,
maybe
so
a
that's what I'm
thousand years
saying.
from now,
The
just
fact that I
propose
cannot
any
propose
approach.
cannot be the fact that I cannot propose, it speaks about the limits of our science right now, or
No,
the limits
it's
of my
fundamental.
ability. No,
It's
it speaks about
fundamental.
I'm a human being, right? I am a human being based on Hoffman's idea. I have a very distorted notion of reality. So
Yeah.
the fact that a person like me who has a very distorted notion of reality, that I cannot envision
But Greg, why
a
do you
way
need
of
more?
doing
Why
that.
do you need more science and technology to find out that suffering exists?
I don't, I'm not saying that. For instance, in
Why do
economics,
you
like I
need the
said,
science to evolve to tell you that
in
suffering exists?
in economics, we study. There's a lot of, I know a lot of people that study subjective well-being, and we study suffering. We study suffering
But
in
that's not what's
ways.
gonna reveal the existence of suffering.
I understand that this is not a complete thing because we're talking about science in 2026. But you are making a claim that is
No,
very outlandish because you're making a
science
claim
can
in the
evolve whatever it
future.
wants. We already know that suffering
Oh,
exists. We do, because we,
no, no,
I
no.
mean,
That we
seriously.
suffer, that already, that suffering already exists. We already know. Of course, we know, and we don't know necessarily because of the axiom that you have. We know because we actually observe self-report of people suffering. That can be totally inside the axiom of
No, you
physicalism.
only know suffering exists because you suffer. Had you never
No, no.
suffered, you wouldn't know that suffering
But
exists.
we know about narratives of other people who are claiming that they have similar experience that sometimes we have, right? Similar
Yeah.
to the thoughts, similar to the ideas. So we can make that intersubjective, as in we can actually make sense and collect patterns about it. And that does not require us to believe that the fundamental unity is consciousness yet. At least for that, we can still talk about that, right?
Um, kind of got
I mean,
lost
we
because we
have
started this.
psychology, we have a lot of science that has been built onto this, and I get the point. I don't want to be the one defending this because part of the reason why a lot of people are still suffering is that there's a fundamental fixation on the notion of objectivity, and that makes I have videos showing that we have a lot of problems with mental health right now, a lot of problems with chronic pains and issues like that. And what I would argue is that not the full reason, but part of the reason why we have a lot of that is that our current levels of science really cannot deal with the excess diversity, the excess heterogeneity there is in those experiences. There are people with too many different experiences, and when we go after causal effects about that, we get averages. It's very hard for us to get beyond basic
You
aggregations and
cannot
basic
you cannot leave
compressions.
spirituality out of the equation. You're never gonna get anywhere. Like if you only look at income, things like that, material stuff, you're not gonna find. I mean, I cannot prove what I'm saying, but we are what we believe to be. Like in that science and method is not the only way to get knowledge about reality. That was the case, you don't know what suffering is again. So you know there's
But
suffering.
do you think scientists think that?
Yes, I
Do you
think that
think I think that?
the whole world assumes that only what science says that exists.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think both
Other
scientists.
than God, and then you have like a some. Oh, okay, not the whole world.
No,
Half the
I
people
do
believe that
understand.
whatever science says, the other people believe that it's God. So if you are Republican, it's God. If you are Democrat, then it's science. It's screwed up. Sorry,
No,
it's like
I understand it's screw up, but I don't believe it. I think some, I mean, some people, I know a lot of scientists, some of my colleagues live life as a scientist as a 9 to 5 job. And so I know a very famous scientist, for instance, who is a pastor.
okay. So
So,
my point is, there is science doesn't have the monopoly on
of
understanding
course,
reality, right?
of course.
And what I'm telling you from being on the other side of science is that if you don't put spirituality in your model, you're not gonna have the full picture.
Sure. I would define spirituality in your sentence as if you don't allow for subjective experiences.
No,
If you
what I'm
define
saying
that
is that
way, yes, for
go and
sure.
measure what people understand themselves to be.
Mhm.
What gives them identity? Like, ask anyone, who are you? What do you believe yourself to be? And then people say, oh, I am an engineer who works at Qualcomm, and I live in San Diego, and I'm a father of two kids, and then that's who I am. Okay, and then you start taking that away from them. So now you lost your job, and now you don't live in San Diego anymore, and now you got divorced, and you don't have the kids anymore, and now you lost your body. You cannot move anymore because you are attached to a bed. So who are you now? And uh, and that's spirituality. Spirituality is knowing who you truly are, because none of those things that can be taken from you define you. But if you are being defined by things that can be taken from you, like income, like housing, like basic, like water, whatever, if you define that to be you, then you'll never be happy. You always
I
be
I
incomplete. Then you
I happen to agree with what you're saying. It's just that that is not
so
a
that has to be in
statement
the
about
model,
reality.
not?
I happen to agree about how I happen to agree with the following causal statement you made, that it's not a good recipe for happiness to create a non-diversified portfolio of identity where you put a lot of weight on things that are outside of your control, and
Yeah,
instead you should put a lot more weight on things that are in your control, and to think about eudaimonia, all these ideas that we know for 3,000 years ago, that
right.
those ideas that like try to maximize virtue and ideas like that. I happen to agree with that. Now, that is not a statement of how the world is out there, which, as we already discussed, according to Hoffman, is a world that is very different from the way the world that we are seeing right now. You see, that's what I mean. It's entirely possible to be a useful approach to live our lives, but if we are going to do that jump and say that therefore the ontology is that, that's where don't necessarily agree. Again, it's possible to be true. I am not disputing that it's possible to be true. See, I'm just saying that I would rather not do that next jump.
But you always, what I'm saying is that you always be handicapped. And even if you took the other assumption the way I do, you'll be always handicapped too, because it's not data anymore. Again, one thing is collecting and analyzing data. The other thing is experiencing data. They are completely different stories. And
But do you think, like, for instance, there are people that are ecstatic in life, they appear to have a good life, and
yeah,
yet some of these people have never contemplated your counterfactuals of what happens if I am not in bed, if I cannot walk, if I
but you have
don't
to
have a
dig
brain, and
deeper
so
and
on.
understand how and why they are so
Exactly.
happy.
What I'm saying is that to make the assertion ex ante that not a single individual is capable of doing that unless they do that, why would I believe that? Like, why
I don't
why
think I
why
said
is it?
that, but
Yeah, this one say, I think that I believe in heterogeneity. I think it's possible there's a big chunk of the population that would do a better life in their lives under one axiom. Another big chunk of the population could have a better life under another axiom. I'm saying that 100% of the people would live
I
a
think
better
yeah, I
life.
said that.
Exactly.
100% of the people would be better off if they were making the assumption that they exist.
Yeah, and I
On the
think that's a bold
fundamentally,
statement.
fundamental.
I
It
I
is
I
bold. I
I
like being
I,
bold.
I like I said,
So this is a
I
bold
think it's
statement, and it's easy to make bold statements when you cannot prove them or test them.
it's not like I
But
can
what
test my statement too, which is this is a bold statement.
it's yeah, I don't see why people wouldn't be better off knowing, getting to better know their true nature. That said, that
Because
the
there's trade-off, right? Because there's
Mhm.
a trade-off. Because there's trade-off. We have limited bandwidth to understand something. It is costly to understand a new paradigm, a new axiom, and understand the full implications of it.
It is
If you
costly.
spend your time doing that, you're not spending time perhaps doing other
And
kind of
actually,
self-development.
and
That's what I mean.
actually, and actually, uh, to be honest. it can be quite painful to deconstruct your own understanding of the world to build a new one. So yeah, I'll take that back. It's not necessarily it won't make you won't necessarily make you happier in the short middle term, but essentially it's essentially it pays out.
Like
But
I saying, like it's really hard for me to even dispute those things because I am having experiences similar to that, right? As you saw in videos of mine, look, I have had experiences 2 years ago that made me be way more open-minded
yeah,
to the idea of consciousness being a more fundamental unit
I think by just
of
being
the
open-minded,
universe.
you're already better off than being closed-minded.
Yeah,
Even
but
though, like,
but like you're
if
saying, like you're saying, like there was an aspect of unlearning going on in the short run for me to, like you were saying, right? It's costly because there's some form of short run unlearning
yeah, I
that
think
is
we can
costly, right?
refer back to the Matrix movie. Like, I wanna have you can have a good life in the Matrix and live in oblivion, and that's fine.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
want that beef. Remember that part of the movie, the guy eating the
yeah,
beef?
yeah. And then you can leave the Matrix and think, "Wow, this is fucked up." Like, and yeah, I want to be back. There's the guy who wants to be back and be live in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oblivion. Like,
That's
just
funny.
give me like the best life ever.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. It's
That's
not for
funny.
everyone. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. But I still tend to think that the more the people the people who are more spiritual, they believe themselves to be more than the body and the brain, and all that takes is like a little faith. You have a religion. I think those who tend to kill themselves less than the millionaires and who people who have so much resource, but they believe them to be the resources that if they lose, if they attach their identity to success, for example, and all of a sudden they are unsuccessful now, they lost everything. That's not a person of faith. That's a person of matter, of
Uh,
physicality.
yes, but I think unfortunately, I think we might be underestimating their choice set, the scope of their choice set. I mean, some people they grew up in some environment. Then now, if you get a 45-year-old, some people have. It's almost like they have very. It's much harder for some of them, these people, to believe in a given religion, or for some these people, or even start becoming less materialistic. So I think, for instance, for some other people, it might be easier for us to be less materialistic. Like for instance, you and
Oh,
I
it
were
depends. It
raised.
depends on your belief system. Yeah. For some people, it's
Yeah.
gonna be easier. Some people, it's gonna be more difficult. But people who believe in God, by just answering that I believe in God, they are already better off in terms of suffering and the suicide thing than the person who's like, I don't believe it. I mean,
I don't know.
I
Do
don't
you
have
know
the
this
data,
is
but
true? I
but
think there's some
you
papers.
should be able to
No,
find.
no, no. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are some papers showing causal evidence, very clean causal evidence, that religion, at least American data, so it will be sort of like some form of Christian religion, has some positive causal effect on indices of happiness. But I think a lot of people, I do not remember exactly what the paper said, but I think a lot of people seem to believe that the channel through which this is happening is through uh, community,
But it's all
have more
interconnected.
people
It's
talking
all
to each other and so
interconnected.
on.
Spiritual people, they are naturally living in community, and materialistic people tend to be individualistic. I think you can find a correlation out there if you look for it.
Yeah, like I said, I think right now we're talking about things about living life, and I really find that being materialistic is a major potential issue that we currently have in our society. And
So that goes with my. I cannot prove that choosing consciousness first is the most truth or the most correct or the most accurate, but it's what gave me more satisfaction in life.
yeah, yeah,
And gave me community too. Like even though when I developed the philosophy and wrote the book, I was completely lonely. But after that, I got community. I got like
Yeah.
then again, like when you strive for people to have the basic income, basic this and that, you should also strive for people to have basic friendships, basic community, basic beliefs, like productive beliefs. Materialism is not a productive belief for the whole. Materialism is a very individualistic belief, and it might be great for the individual who wants to become successful and all that. But when you go to those metrics of happiness,
But
realization,
I don't understand why we're talking about this. Like, for instance, to one can be a physicalist when they speak about ontology, and yet they are not materialistic when they speak about living their life. The same way as one can believe in evolution and not be selfish,
I
right?
think it's a contradiction. Like
Why?
you,
Like,
you,
for
you
instance,
can you can
you
use
believe
two
in
different.
evolution,
You
you
can use
believe in evolution, and you don't. If you see a dog in front of you, you're not gonna kill them, or not necessarily behave like what our ancestors would have behaved naturally. We can develop new skills and tools to understand that the world is actually more complex than the way we were evolved to be, to think. We can do science. I mean, think about skepticism is one of the hardest things to evolve coming from being fit in evolution. And yet we do believe in evolution. I think it's entirely possible for our ontology to be very different from the way we understand how to live our lives, right? Like I just told you the case of stoicism and free will. For me, that's one of my many contradictions.
but
I have
it's
a
a
lot of paradoxes
contradiction.
like that
Yeah, it's a
because I
contradiction.
believe that
But
there's no
that's
free
fine.
will.
We are contradictory beings.
Exactly. I'm fine with that because
But it's a contradiction. It doesn't
it
stop being a
works.
contradiction.
Yeah, it's a contradiction, but it works for me, or at least it's been working for me. At least that's my evidence. You see,
Yeah.
so I am full of contradictions like that. As long as it's working, it's working.
Yeah.
It's funny. Hey, this is really amazing. Thank you for taking the time to do this
Thanks,
and for
Greg.
me to
Yeah,
understand exactly what is going on.
it's
Cool,
been a
man.
long conversation. All
Yeah,
right.
it was
See you
awesome.
next
Good
time
talking
then.
to you, Daniel. Bye. See you later.
Bye.